I was 13 the day my parents left me at the gas station. I remember the clouds over the interstate, hanging low like they were trying to crush the sky. The car smelled like stale fast food and anger. My brother, Noah, was in the front seat, blasting music through his headphones like he didn't hear our parents yelling, but he did. He always did. It started over something small. My brother had forgotten his gym bag at home. Somehow, that turned into being my fault. You were the last one to touch it. Dad barked, glaring at me through the rearview mirror. I didn't even touch his bag. I said, heart pounding. Don't lie to us, Eli, Mom snapped. You're always making things difficult. That was the moment I knew. I wasn't a kid in trouble, I was a problem. And problems had to be dealt with. They didn't speak much after that. We drove in silence for an hour before Dad suddenly pulled into a rundown gas station off Highway 81. The kind of place with flickering lights and a vending machine full of expired snacks. He got out, slammed the door, and walked to the convenience store. Mom turned around in her seat. Get out. What? I asked, thinking she must be joking. You heard me. Get out. I looked at Noah. He didn't look back. Are you serious? I asked, my voice cracking. You need to learn what consequences feel like, she said. We'll come back once you've had time to think. I stepped out. The door slammed behind me. I didn't even have time to ask when they'd be back. I stood there, watching the car pull away like it was part of some nightmare I hadn't woken up from. The taillights disappeared down the road, and I was alone. 6 hours from home. No phone. No money. Just a kid with a name and a duffel bag full of clothes for a weekend soccer tournament I wasn't going to anymore. The gas station clerk was a guy named Ron, who looked like he had seen too many things and cared too little. He gave me a bottle of water when I asked to use the phone. You don't know their number? He asked. I do, I said, dialing. It rang. And rang. No answer. I tried again. And again. They ain't picking up, kid. I nodded and sat on a bench outside, the one with rusted metal arms and gum stuck under the seat. For hours I watched people come and go. Some gave me looks, curious, suspicious, a few sympathetic, but no one stopped. I stopped hoping after the sun began to dip behind the trees. Ron eventually came out, wiping his hands on his shirt. Look, I called someone, he said. CPS is sending someone out. You're not supposed to be out here alone. I didn't know what CPS meant at the time. I thought maybe he meant police. I didn't care. I just didn't want to be forgotten. It was nearly midnight when the woman showed up. Her name was Darlene. She wore a red cardigan and had kind eyes, but not in a way that felt fake. She crouched down and looked me in the eyes. Eli, right? I nodded. We're going to make sure you're safe tonight. She took me in her car, gave me a granola bar and a blanket from the back seat. She didn't ask too many questions, and that was the first time I didn't feel like I was being interrogated. At the shelter, the bed was small but clean. The sheets smelled like bleach. I curled up under them, still wearing my hoodie. I didn't cry. I didn't feel anything yet. My brain had shut the world off like a bad TV. But somewhere deep inside, a thought crept in, and it stayed with me. They're not coming back. And I was right. The next morning, I sat in a room with walls painted a cheery yellow that didn't match how I felt inside. Darlene sat beside me, filling out paperwork. A man in a button-down shirt came in and smiled like he practiced it in the mirror. Hi, Eli. I'm Mr. Ramirez. I help kids like you find safe places to stay while we figure out what's next. What's next? I asked. We'll try to contact your parents, he said gently. But in the meantime, we've found you a temporary home. They called it a placement. A foster home. Just a few nights, they said. The house belonged to a couple named David and Marlene Harper. They lived about 40 minutes away in a quiet neighborhood with wide sidewalks and oak trees that made tunnels with their branches. The driveway had a basketball hoop and wind chimes jingled near the porch. It didn't feel like a place where kids got left behind. Marlene greeted me with a soft hug that smelled like lavender. David gave me a firm handshake and a kind smile. "Let's get your stuff inside, champ." I didn't correct him that I didn't have much stuff. Just a duffel bag and the echoes of what I used to call home. That night, dinner was spaghetti and meatballs. The table was full of conversation that didn't require me to explain who I was or what had happened. They asked how I liked my food. If I had any allergies. If I liked playing sports. I didn't know how to respond to kindness. It felt foreign, like a language I used to speak but forgot. In my new room, I stared at the ceiling and waited for the anger to come. For the yelling. For someone to grab my arm too hard or tell me I was a burden. But it never came. Instead, Marlene knocked softly and peeked in. "Everything okay?" I nodded. "Well, if you need anything, we're right across the hall." That was the first time in years I didn't sleep with one eye open. School was awkward. New kid. Quiet. Weird. But I kept my head down and did my work. The Harpers didn't push me to be social, but they encouraged me to try things. I joined the soccer team. It felt familiar, running, passing, the rhythm of the game. It gave me something to control. One afternoon after practice, David waited by the car, holding something behind his back. It was a brand new soccer ball. "Thought you could use your own," he said. I stared at it. "You didn't have to." "We wanted to," Marlene added from the passenger seat. "They didn't just feed me. They showed up to every game, every parent night, every school event. They weren't filling in, they were stepping up." Still, I waited for it to fall apart. One wrong move. One forgotten item. One mistake, and they'd toss me aside too. But that day never came. 6 months in, we sat around the dinner table when David cleared his throat. "Eli," he said, "we've been talking. And if you're open to it, we'd like to adopt you." I dropped my fork. "Only if you want that too," Marlene added quickly. "There's no pressure. We love you. And you belong here." I didn't answer right away. I couldn't. My throat had closed up, my eyes burning. It wasn't just about being wanted. It was about finally being seen. Not as a burden. Not as a mistake. But as a son. "I'd like that," I whispered. And just like that, I became Eli Harper. That night, in the same room that once felt temporary, I looked in the mirror and whispered my new name. Over and over, like a prayer. Eli Harper. For the first time in my life, I believed it was real. High school came fast, and for the first time, I wasn't just surviving, I was living. With the Harpers, life had rhythm. Mornings started with pancakes and half-sleepy smiles, nights ended with warm lights and the comfort of knowing someone would be there tomorrow. I joined the debate club, worked part-time at a bookstore, and spent weekends helping David in the garage or watching old movies with Marlene on the couch. The fear didn't vanish overnight. I still jumped when voices got too loud. Still froze when I made mistakes. But over time, the fear dulled. I started to believe the worst wouldn't always happen. I started to believe in tomorrow. One fall evening, sitting on the porch swing after dinner, David looked over and said, "You ever think about college?" I shrugged. "Sometimes. But I don't know. Do you think I could?" He didn't hesitate. "I think you could do anything, Eli. I applied to 5 schools. Got into 4. I picked the one furthest from where I'd been left, the University of Michigan. It felt symbolic. A fresh chapter. Before I left, Marlene handed me a letter. Don't read it now. Read it when you need to remember who you are. I cried the whole drive to campus. Not because I was scared, but because I wasn't. They had given me roots strong enough to chase my wings. College was hard. The classes, the independence, the loneliness in crowds. But it was also freeing. I met people who didn't know the name Harper used to be borrowed. I studied business and real estate, driven by some invisible fire in my chest to build a life no one could take away from me. Sophomore year, I started interning at a real estate agency. Junior year, I was shadowing the CEO. By senior year, I'd built a business plan, gathered mentorships, and pitched investors. Harper & Company opened 2 months after graduation. A small office, 3 agents, and a vision. I worked day and night, closing deals, studying market trends, taking calls at 2 a.m. Nothing was handed to me. But that was okay. I knew how to work. I'd been surviving since I was 13. 3 years in, we were the fastest-growing boutique agency in the state. I bought a house with a wraparound porch just like the Harpers. Bought them a new car. Took them to Hawaii for their anniversary. You spoil us, Marlene said. I'm just getting started, I grinned. But even as I built this new life, the past lingered. I still had the same name. The same face. And sometimes, in the mirror, I still saw the kid on that gas station bench. So I did something about it. I legally changed my name to Elijah David Harper. Elijah, because it sounded whole. David, for the man who taught me what a father should be. Harper, because that name saved me. I remember standing outside the courthouse, papers in hand, sun on my face. It felt like a baptism, like every bruise and scar had been turned into armor. Later that night, I finally opened Marlene's letter. Eli. No matter where life takes you, remember this, you are not what they did to you. You are what you choose to become. You are our son, always. With love. Marlene. I cried like I hadn't since the day I was left behind. But this time, they were tears of healing. I had become Eli Harper. Not in name. In truth. And I was just getting started. It started with an email. A short, blunt message in my company inbox with a familiar last name that hit me like a brick to the chest, Jacobson. Noah. Hey, it's Noah. Our parents want to get in touch. They saw something about you in the paper. Call me. I stared at the screen for a long time. It felt like opening a sealed vault and finding rot inside. I didn't call. I deleted the email. But a week later, I got another one, this time from a Gmail account with no name. Just a sentence. You owe us. Your success is because of where you came from. Don't forget that. I sat back in my chair, staring at the city skyline from my high-rise office. I laughed, bitter and low. Where I came from? The side of a gas station parking lot? That night, I told David and Marlene. David wanted to call a lawyer. Marlene just held my hand and said, "You don't owe anyone anything but yourself." Still, I couldn't shake the feeling. Like ghosts rattling the windows of a house I'd already rebuilt from the ground up. 2 weeks later, they showed up. At my office. Unannounced. My secretary buzzed in, confused. "There's a couple here. They say they're your parents." I went cold. I told her to keep them in the waiting room and pulled myself together. When I stepped out, I was face to face with the people who had taught me the meaning of abandonment. They looked older. More tired. But their eyes were the same, entitled, hollow. "Eli," my mother said, standing. It's Elijah now, I replied. My father looked around the office. Nice place. Didn't think you'd end up doing so well after what you pulled. What I pulled? I said, blinking. You mean getting left at a gas station 6 hours from home? My mom scoffed. We came back for you. You weren't there. You came back 2 days later, I said. After a social worker had already taken me into custody. After the police had been notified. Don't pretend that was love. That was damage control. They stared at me, mouths tight. Anyway, my father muttered, we didn't come to argue. We came because Noah's trying to get his life together. He needs a car to get to work. A decent one. He's your brother. We thought maybe you could help out. I let the silence stretch. You thought wrong. My mother's voice sharpened. Don't be cruel. Family helps each other. I stood there, tall and calm in a suit they couldn't afford, in a life they had no part of. You want to talk about family? I had one. They showed up to every game. They held me when I cried. They didn't leave me behind like garbage. You lost your right to ask for anything the moment you drove away. You ungrateful little, my father hissed. I'm not ungrateful, I said, stepping back. I'm free. I turned to my assistant. Escort them out. As they were led away, I said one final thing. Calm. Precise. Deadly. You taught me what it feels like to be discarded. Now you'll learn what it feels like to be forgotten. They tried again. Letters. Messages. Even a voicemail from Noah, saying I was being dramatic. I blocked them all. Weeks passed. Months. And then the final blow came on a day that was supposed to be joyous. My wedding. Rachel and I had planned it down to the last detail. Intimate. Elegant. Surrounded by the people who mattered. Marlene walked me down the aisle. David gave the toast. There wasn't a single chair reserved for the people who shared my DNA. But they came anyway. Right in the middle of the reception, they crashed the celebration. My mother in a floral dress that clashed with everything around her. My father already half drunk. They caused a scene, shouting about how I'd turned my back on them, how I was an embarrassment, how they'd made me. The music stopped. Everyone stared. I walked over to them slowly, like approaching a sleeping animal I didn't trust not to bite. You don't belong here, I said. This is your wedding. We're your parents, my mother hissed. I motioned to security. Escort them out. She lunged forward. How could you do this to us? I looked her in the eyes. And I said it. You taught me what it feels like to be left behind. Now you get to feel it too. They were gone within minutes. The music resumed. And I danced, not in spite of them, but because of everything I'd survived. Because this wasn't their story anymore. It was mine. The weeks after the wedding were quiet. Not empty, but settled. Like the storm had finally passed and the wreckage was cleared. Rachel and I returned from our honeymoon to a home filled with light, plants she'd picked out herself, and a stack of unopened letters I never intended to read. One morning, I stood in our kitchen with coffee in my hand, watching the sunrise through the big windows. Rachel came up behind me, wrapped her arms around my waist. You okay? She asked. Yeah, I said. For once, I think I really am. But healing isn't linear. Some wounds don't scab over. They settle into you. Become part of your story. Sometimes I still passed gas stations and felt that same 13-year-old ache in my ribs. Sometimes I had dreams where I was standing outside that convenience store, watching a car drive away over and over again. But other times, I'd dream of a porch swing, a soccer field, a quiet dinner table where my name was spoken with kindness. And I'd wake up with peace in my chest. Years passed. Harper and Company expanded into 3 cities. David had a heart scare but pulled through. Marlene started a garden club. Rachel and I welcomed a daughter, Lily. The first time I held her, I felt something break open inside me. A vow formed silently in my chest: you will never know abandonment. You will never beg to be seen. You will be loved so loudly it echoes through your bones. She was 2 when she first asked about my parents. "Daddy, where are your mommy and daddy?" I paused, kneeling beside her. "They're not in our life, sweetheart." "Why not?" I looked her in the eyes. "Because sometimes, the people who bring us into the world, aren't the ones who teach us how to live in it." She seemed to understand in that magical way kids do. She nodded solemnly and handed me her stuffed rabbit. "Here. He'll help you not be sad." I held it tighter than I meant to. On my 35th birthday, I got a letter. No return address. Handwritten. "Eli. I don't know if this will reach you. I don't know if I even deserve to write it. But I want you to know I think about you every day. I'm sorry for everything. I was a coward. A bad mother. And I hope, somehow, you found happiness. Love. Mom." I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I folded it and tucked it into a box in my closet. A box labeled, "Things that tried to break me." One day, Lily asked to visit her grandparents. Grandma and Grandpa Harper, she meant. We drove over on a Sunday afternoon. David was outside fixing a bird feeder. Marlene had lemonade waiting. They spoiled her with books and cookies and stories about when I was her age. Watching them with her, I realized something. This was the reward. Not the money. Not the skyline view. Not the revenge or the closure or the poetic justice. This. A life rewritten. A name reclaimed. A legacy rebuilt from ashes. Before we left that evening, Marlene pulled me aside. "You know, we never told you this, but the night we brought you home, I had a dream. I dreamed of a boy who grew into a man who changed everything." I smiled. "You were right." She cupped my face. "No, sweetheart. You made it right." Later that night, I tucked Lily into bed. She asked for a story. I told her one about a boy who got lost, but found a new path. A boy who learned that family isn't who leaves you, it's who stays. She fell asleep halfway through. I watched her breathe, steady and soft, and whispered into the dark. "I am not what they did to me. I am the man I chose to be." And that truth, finally, was enough.